And before joining our session today, I was just reflecting on my biggest takeaway after attending last year's Nature Positive Global Summit in Sydney that had about 196 countries attend. And that insight is that we need to speak the same language as investors ASAP. Urgently, if we're going to bend the curve up and to the right for more natural capital investment to be redirected into the environment, hence the evolution of Truey Natural Capital Platform to bridge the gap and unlock investment into critical environmental projects. If we don't close that gap on speaking the same investor language, then we're going to see the private, the corporate, the philanthropic funding of environmental projects just trickle along and totally underfunding what is required. And, we know minimum that we need to invest in Australia $7.5 billion. We know that when we combine green treasury bonds, government grants, large philanthropic, corporate dollars, we're lucky to crack 2 billion. And for me, that's a massive shortfall. And that 7.5 billion increases dramatically every year that we don't hit that 7.5 billion. So without any further ado, now that most people have joined, I'll hand over to Nick Marsh, Truey co-founder, just to step us through his thoughts on natural capital and then move into the online demonstration of the Truey Natural Capital Platform. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to share a screen with you. And I've got a few slides to get us started. So I'm Nick Marsh, Managing Director at Truey. We build web applications, mostly environmental reporting, and almost all kind of government-related clients. We've been doing that for a long time. And from what we've learned, with how can we bring this to bear rather than working on sort of government single issue topics, water quality or a biodiversity problem, how can we make what we've learned available more broadly? So we've built out this thing called Natural Capital Suite. We've been busy in the background building this thing. We've only just started to talk about it. Had a great catch up at the Natural NRM conference last week, and a whole bunch of people said, hey, that might be interesting. We want to know more, so let's put on a quick demo today. And so the intention today is to go quickly across the suite of products, see if there's things that pique your interest, record the demo so you can share it with others in your team, and we can follow up and talk in more depth about any of these things. So just to kind of set the scene a bit for us and why we're kind of embarking on this journey. So and we all have heard the corporate commitment, and Steve touched on it there as well, but so 69 of the world's 100 largest economies are not countries, but companies. And change is often led by these guys. So, we heard yesterday the federal government, we're shooting for 62% reduction in CO2 by 2035. Awesome, signalling. But if you look at a company level, those numbers are much more ambitious as well. And they're led, not by the citizens or by their citizens, their shareholders and who buys from them, right? They're motivated to do these things. But working in the industry, we're not really seeing the avalanche, right? So there's a promise and commitment of investment on the ground. We're not really seeing that avalanche. And so from Truey's perspective, building web apps to represent sort of the best available science for decision making, how can we contribute to that? So having a look at how this industry works in the simplest kind of terms, it's a market like any other market with demand and supply. And the demand historically totally driven by sort of government philanthropic and supplies to the landholders where we do work. But the process is kind of slow, high transaction costs. Each grant's got a new complicated kind of reporting mechanism and assessment process. It's high. So now we're trying to engage with, a new bunch of potential bigger demand from industry and finance sectors. They don't want to engage in this kind of high transaction cost world, or we think, how can we get them in contact with the supply side more seamlessly, less transaction costs and less friction. So Natural Capital Suite is about dealing with that. And to develop our Natural Capital Suite, we had a look at what we think are the sticky points along that value chain between supply and demand, where we can hopefully contribute and add some value. So we've got a series of different products here in Natural Capital Suite, and I'll run through demo those today. So we've got Natural Capital Region for regional prioritisation. defining the way forward at a regional level, where we think the best investment shall be, and be able to capture historic projects. Natural capital project at an individual project farm level, quantify what's going on at that individual farm project level. Natural capital count, I'm not going to spend too much time on today. So this is really at an individual farm level, being able to quantify your land stewardship, so to demonstrate your performance for your value chain, to give Woolworths confidence that your carrots are grown in the best possible way. Natural capital market is about these on-ground investment opportunities. How do you communicate that to a broader investment pool? And natural capital impact. So how do you rapidly create sort of compelling dashboards to communicate the great work that you're doing? So the kind of each individual products with kind of an overlapping Venn diagram, if you like, of users across that suite. But why it's a suite and why it's collective is because what we've got is a consistent number of underlying metrics or indicators. So it's about creating a currency, so there's consistency for those kind of external to the industry to be able to interpret and understand what's going on. To get to those underlying metrics, effectively, we looked across the natural resource management groups across the country. What do they put in their annual report? What do they report against? What do their constituents care about? So that formed the basis of our underlying collection of measures, and we can roll those up and report them against other frameworks, ESGs and TNFDs and AESF and the like. But the fundamental principle here is to capture things in the terms that have already been defined as being important. So before I jump into the demo, so about the timing of how these things are coming out. So we're building these and releasing them as we go. So we've been going for 2.5 years now and working closely with a small group delivering these things. So region is out now, impact is out now, project will be out soon, and then the next cab off the rank will be natural capital market early in the new year. So let's jump out of that and get in and do a bit of a demo of what this stuff does. So if you haven't been there already, so we've got an underlying website to get to the collective suite, so naturalcapitalsuite.au. We'll share that link if we haven't already. And something you'll be thinking about is, where's the underlying science? What are the underlying indicators that are used in here? So what we're trying to do is not reinvent the wheel wherever we can. So where there's methods that already exist, data sets that already exist, be as clear and open about that as we can. So for example, under natural capital region, you'll be able to find this indicator page, and then for each specific implementation, there's an underlying list of all the underlying data that's been used to go into it. Okay, let's jump into natural capital region. So this is pitched at, and we roll these out at a NRM region by NRM region. So I scroll on here, you can feel for where we've got these instances implemented so far. So we've got all of Queensland covered, Northern New South Wales, all of Tas, an example in Western Australia, and one in Victoria as well. And I'm going to jump in and give you what I think is going to be a relatively simple example. So we're going to jump to Northern Tas, North NRM region. And so when we create an instance of natural capital region, we effectively represent all those underlying indicators that we care about to represent the current condition. And then the notion of this tool, we've got the current condition, we create actions that have an impact benefit on those conditions, predict a likely outcome. But this initial page is quite useful just to represent what the current conditions are for those sort of regional units, subcatchments, if you like, and represent the underlying conditions for each of those. What's actually pretty handy about this side as well, just to be able to create your own hotspots map, if you like. So of those collective indicators, combine those up to come up with a combined representation of what a hotspot might represent. So in this case, I care about water quality, biodiversity. We're looking at the catchments that might have the greatest opportunity. And what's handy about this side, We can share that. If I can stick that in the chat. So there's a shareable link to be able to explore that initial condition page. So then what happens at a natural capital region level, we define the actions, the things that we can do on the ground and the relative benefits of those things. So I've had a look at an example that Tissue Webster gave at NRM conference last week about this great project in the Tamar Valley, Tamar Estuary program, focusing on riparian work. So that I'll use that as an example here. So I've created a little action library of primarily riparian related things that are going on in that program. So if we look at this action of riparian fencing, stock exclusion and revegetation, we can define what that action is, what the characteristics of it are, what type of action it is, what areas it's being applied to, what the CapEx and OpEx costs are associated with that. And then of all those underlying indicators, and I'm going to scroll down here, we quantify the relative benefit of that action on that indicator. So these are riparian work. We're going to impact on stream bank erosion. We have ways to represent the relative effectiveness of that and represent the relative rate of change as well. And then the underlying confidence we have in our prediction of that effectiveness. And that'll hopefully all become apparent. There's some more details here we won't go into about adoption, a likelihood of adoption of these activities, and then advanced features to be able to spatially, explicitly define all those characteristics of the action. So let's have a look at a scenario now. I've created an action library, so it's a list of things we can do. So let's have a look at a scenario I put together here about that program. So we're assuming 100% adoption in this case. We're going to run this in a meet budgets mode, which means we have an overall $11 million budget. Of those actions we've got, what are we going to get for an $11 million bucks? We could do a perform all action. So you pick a subset of those things you want to do, and it'll tell you how much it'll cost and what the benefits might be. Or meet targets. So you can set targets. I want a 5% improvement in this and a 10% improvement in that, and it'll select the activities, tell you how much it'll cost and what you should do, where you should do it. So we set our locations up. So this Tamar Estuary program, it's not the whole region, just all those catchments around the Tamar Valley. So this sort of Launceston group, if you like. We grab our library of actions. So this is this little library I created, and I've just turned on the riparian one. One's got riparian fencing, stock exclusion and re-veg, and the other one's just fencing and let nature take its course. You can filter all these things by different action types, the confidence you've got in the outcome. So you only want to favour programs that have high likelihoods of adoptions, and response times as well. So I want to favour actions that are fast or slow. Let's not worry about that today. And we're not going to worry about negative actions today, but this is about being able to consider what we've got in there is an initial baseline. So that's the current condition, but we know that that doesn't stay horizontal. If we do nothing, the business as usual cases, that declines. So it's about being able to capture those activities. So might be continued clearing in Queensland or not having weed management programs in place. So to be able to effectively quantify preservation style works, which often kind of get a bit of a raw deal in terms of funding. That's great. We know which area we're working on. We know which actions we want to consider. Then what do we care about in terms of coming up with a prioritised list of what we might do with those? So again, these are the indicators that we care about, whether we want to consider them and how much we want to consider them. So depending on what your motivation is here, turn any combination of those things on, and then ultimately we'll get a prioritised list of actions per each subcatchment and default areas that you might want to apply that to. Cool. I'll run it. So here's our result from running that implementation of that program. So what we're looking at for this overall region, we've got big improvements in biodiversity, as you'd expect. So these things mostly result in lots of revegetation related activities. We've got the overall cost breakdown through time. So this one we were assuming immediate adoption, everyone gets on board, and we've got relatively low ongoing operating. You get a feel for the cost breakdown over time. This thing's a marginal cost abatement curve. So effectively for every additional dollar we spend, the different actions we do, the relative improvement in those things. And what you're looking for in these is where you get a break point like this. We're getting really good improvement for relatively little spend. Once it starts to flatten out, you're getting to the point of kind of diminishing returns. So that's kind of useful in this investment prioritization, portfolio development activity. And then we've got a list of every of the individual kind of actions by subcatchment, what it might cost, what the area you might treat, and what the collective benefits might be for those. So that's at the whole region level. We can drill down and look at that per each of the subcatchments we're treating as well. So you get that sort of localized representation of what might go on. This view as well, we can also share. So that's another thing. I've created a scenario and I want to share this with my team or a potential funder. This is the portfolio we're going for. So that's another bit of functionality. In fact, let me just do that. Stick that in the chat. That's great. Awesome program. We're representing and quantifying the relative benefits of what might have come out of that investment program. Good to be able to share that with the world, right? In a relatively straightforward way. So that's going to move us on to the next product in this range. So natural capital impact. So it's about being able to create your own dashboards to report the work that you're doing. So I've taken the details out of natural capital region there, those initial conditions, and then what's come out of the scenario to create a quick demo of what a dashboard might look like. Well, hang on, I'm going to have to put that away so you can't see my password. There we go. So I'm jumped into this Tamar Estuary example here. And this is kind of the back end in creating this report card. We've defined a theme with some styling, a layout, how we want things to report, how we want to grade things, what the locations are. So by a GeoJSON file representing each of these locations, what the indicators are that we care about. So I've used a subset out of natural capital region, the things that we're going to impact upon here. The underlying data. Oh, we can jump into one of these. So, and then for each individual indicator, how we want it displayed, how we want to score those as being an impact or not. The underlying data that drives each of those things. So you can upload the files or interact directly with the effectively a table form. And then let's just jump straight now to what this thing might look like. So we can publish this thing. We've got a live site here. Let's just do that. And I'll open it up there. So this is that dashboard representing the program that we've modelled in natural capital region. A publicly available site, can be a standalone site. You can embed it in other corporate websites. So we've got the spatial representation. We're looking at stream bank sediment there. We can show on the map our different indicators. We can add other contextual information describing what's going on. What can we do here? We can drill down a bit deeper as well into each of those as well. So really quick overview, but effectively you get the idea, create a dashboard, communicate what the great work that you're doing. Now let's go back to that project, right? What it is a whole bunch of on-ground projects, and we want to be able to quantify each of those individual ones. Designing the program, awesome. We need 1,000 hectares of something. revegetation work. Where do we need it? We need to go and find willing landholders and effectively create those projects. So I'm going to try and get to that up here without clicking on the stop sharing. So Natural Capital Project. So this is a product that's it's been in development for about 18 months now. So it's close to coming out. So this one applies nationally, straight out of the can. And what I'll demonstrate today is the native revegetation component that we've got in there. But we've got preservation activities and riparian management going on, as well as other activity types going on as well. Now, so I'm trying to click my tabs without clicking the stop sharing button. Okay, let's go. Sorry, I'm going to have to relog in. So let's have a look at a demo project I've created for that part of the world. So I'll zoom out here so you get a feel for where you are. Amazing Tasmania. And we've picked a nice little site here, the confluence of these streams. And so we're going to do a revegetation project here. You can get some other meta or contextual layers, if you like, over the top of that. So we're showing different land uses here as well. We can do the hill slope erosion, land cover, biodiversity hotspots, kind of information as well for context. So having defined our project, similar to region, what's the base condition for this site? So now we've intercepted a whole bunch of spatial layers and tells us about how big the site is, what the rainfall is, where it exists, the bioregion, the surrounding land uses, terrain, vegetated areas. We run, in this case, it's a USLE-based hill slope erosion model that we've got running nationally to predict an erosion rate of that site in its current state. Our species list, so endangered species that are occurring on that site or nearby, sites of significance as well, and then social elements as well. So these are indexes of socio-economic sort of relative advantage and disadvantage. These are ABS statistics, employment diversities, employment gender ratios, and First Nations engagement in the workforce in that part of the world. That's great. That's your kind of base condition. Now, the plan, the project, what are we going to do? We've drawn the polygon, and on that polygon, it was pasture with moderate cover. We're going to plant some trees. We're going to employ 3 people on this project. 2 of them are women. One's a First Nations woman. 2 are young, 1 mature. All 3 of them live locally. One's in a managerial position, and she's a First Nations woman, mature First Nations woman, and we pay them reasonably well, not the best, permanent full-time, but permanent part-time with paid leave. First Nations engagement here is reasonably high because it's being led by a First Nations person, and the local community engagement, how we're engaging with the community in the project design, where we're getting our products and services to deliver this. We're going to use a local nursery to plant these trees, and then collective governance around this project as well. Get all those things. We've got some more detail we can add to it, and then we generate an impact report, collectively the outcomes of what are you achieving with this project. So this impact report for this site is giving us a total score of 62, and we're reporting at the highest level, ESG and P, productivity, but also being able to report against other frameworks as well, the benefits of those things. So we can have a look under the hood to some of the underlying scores, if you like, that collectively generate our environmental score. We've got biodiversity scores, water scores, soil impact, CO2 sequestration components in here, social and governance. So all those questions we answered about who's employed in the project, or we look at the ABS stats for what's going on in that part of the world. to rank this project relative to the norm in that part of the world to see if you're moving the dial and give you credit or encourage you to engage the community better for these overall impacts. Cool. And we've got because we said this thing is part of an ongoing farming enterprise, there's some underlying productivity scores that we can generate as well to be able to demonstrate the potential value of that for the broader farming enterprise. Okay, so let's go back to this impact summary. That's cool. I've got a project. Didn't quite make the cut in that last government grant funding round. It's in the top drawer. Well, how do I bring that to bear for this magical large bucket of money that corporates would like to invest in these things? And that brings us on to this next product, Natural Capital Market. And so this is really about connecting buyers and sellers, bringing prospective projects to market. So this one's not in live production, if you like. So this is semi-live design for where we're going with these things. So the intention here is to be able to have a marketplace where you can lift projects and list them with a whole bunch of kind of consistent metrics, being able to filter and find the types of things that you want, and then being able to investigate the underlying details of each of those projects in a consistent way. So it's not just a Craig's list of, I've got a good idea. All these things report against the same collective metrics and frameworks. So there's an ability to compare and contrast, if you like. So similarly, so you recognise this from projects, the sort of measures that we're representing, quantifying those things, reporting back against different frameworks, which matters in the corporate world because this is the things that they've got to report against to their board and shareholders. Overall summaries and similarly details for all the underlying components as well, the environment and social governance components here as well. So that's the idea of being able to publish projects to connect with sellers. What we also want to be able to do is connect those who have got investment opportunities seeking projects as well. So to be able to list those opportunities. So try and connect both sides of this marketplace, if you like. Pretty whirlwind summary of what's going on. I'm not going to show you our design of account yet. We're still working through that, but and this account won't be out until probably mid of next year, so there'll be plenty of time to learn about that. But so you get a fair feel for this workflow that we're looking at here between region, coming up with investment portfolios and collectively assessing the value of work that you've done, being able to create report cards, public-facing dashboards to communicate what's going on in your world and the great outcomes that are coming out of it. Project, individual, farm-based, or farm scale representation, quantification of the value of those things, and then market, being able to communicate that in a consistent way to potential investors. Now, before we open it up for questions, so you've probably been to our truey.com website, so you'll get a feel for our other backstory as well, the Natural Capital Suite, so all the other kind of related worlds that we work in here to kind of see how we've got to where we've got to with this. And there's also a fair bit of content in here as well to explore. So a lot of stories. So our blog articles around all these topics that we're so keen on and thought about and want to write about and get feedback on, and Truey Conversations. So it's a blog here. We've got 10 up so far. I think there's another batch of probably 4 coming out as well. Really trying to get impact from different people across the sector and get their views on what natural capital means for them, where the risks, where the opportunities are. See some names here. Natalie, there you go. Hey. Right.
All right, yeah, I'm happy just for 5 minutes if people want to hang back.
Sorry to put you on the spot, mate.
No, you're right. So I think I see a lot of familiar faces from when we presented in Cairns, and I'll just say if anyone has any questions around sort of how we're using it from an NRM perspective, happy for you to reach out and answer any questions. But yeah, for us, I guess there's a couple different tools there that TRUI have, and so I'll just kind of take it through how we've sort of used it. So for us regions, it's primarily that tool we're using as sort of like building out future investment portfolios. So for us, we view it as like it's sort of the tool that if you're building out your NRM strategies or any regional priority strategies, is a way to actually build out an investment portfolio for the actions that fall out of that. And for us, the strength is I think, for us, it's been two ways. By not quantifying some of these additional co-benefits, I think in the past we've probably undersold the value we contribute to the region and actually the value we create with our projects beyond just for us in the reef space water quality benefits. It actually, once you've built your library, the good thing for us is we can actually run those scenarios very quick and on the fly. So for our investment portfolios, we can set up like a table that just shows the different benefits in terms of reporting against co-benefits. We can then associate some costs and complexity in delivery for that as well. But you can rapidly assess it. So we can look at, for us, what kind of investment do we need to actually hit our Reef 2050 targets based on the priorities. We can run it based on if we have X dollars of investment come in for a project, what kind of outcomes we can get for that as well. If we're talking to parties outside of the government from our traditional funding sources, it's a way we can sort of sell them on different co-benefits, because I know they, from our chats, there's sort of a transactional cost between selling a ESG or SDG outcome beyond just water quality. And then we can also run it based on community priorities. So through our community engagement and our things like our NRM plans, we can actually run what does that scenarios look like based on community priority versus just a direct priority from a outcome. And then so that builds out for that. And one thing I think is quite powerful with regions that we've sort of found as an unintended outcome is that if you want to introduce an action into your region from outside the region, or a different actional priority that you particularly haven't delivered in the past. So for us, looking at, like, we know we're starting to get to the end of the rope when it comes to refining inputs in sugarcane. So we want to look at systems beyond the paddock through treatment systems and practices like that can sort of pick up where we're starting to run out of rope. So there's a lot of literature on that. So you can actually still build your actions around that, do your confidence. And we found it's been a strong tool for us to actually kind of help justify supporting a project for some of these practices that typically haven't been run in the region as well. And that's all at that regional scale. So whether it be at like a basin scale across your whole region, or at like a receiving waters, once we get interest, and we've had interest, so for us, tourism's big. So we've had interest from the tourist sector about trying to invest back into the economy and around that ecotourism. That's where we move then to projects. And for us, we work with a lot of smaller landholders, so they don't have the same potential to go for carbon credits. The return's just not there, and they don't have the property size to make it worth it. But for us, then we look at projects and we go, okay, well, in this region, we know we want some investment in, say, Proserpine Basin, for example. We can actually then go, if we have 10 landholders that are interested in a re-veg methodology, we can kind of quantify, go down to that next level, build that project and sort of accumulate those landholders under the project. And then we can use that to actually then sell on those outcomes that are reported against the sustainability frameworks as a transaction to those sort of non-government investors that want to invest in for us. And then the next step for that is then when we do the project and we work on the actual farm level and we want to give them the farm individual outcomes, that's where, when we've been talking with the team, so it's not live yet, but that's where then we will bring in natural capital accounts to give the farmer their actual account of their property and what's happened as well. But yeah, that's sort of been our approach, and it's worked well. I guess the biggest benefit for us, and not to try to create more work for Dave, but if you're working with him, Dave's been, if we run into an issue, we just give Dave a bell and annoy him about how to fix it. Or if we want something from the tool, he's been very accommodating in terms of how we can actually go about reporting it, or if we run into an issue and we're not sure how to move forward. So that's always been, it's been massive for us. But
Thanks for sharing.
that's just high level. If you want any more detail, give us a bell. Happy to chat.